Alrighty, so today we're going to start talking about rational exponents. So the past couple days you have spent learning about how to simplify a radical, whether that be square root, cube root, fourth root, fifth root. And then you started doing the same idea, only then you added variables to it. So now what we're going to learn how to do is going back and forth from exponents to radicals. So there we go. When I write the square root of 25, I want to put it as an exponent. What I do first is I copy the base number over. So I take that 25 and I rewrite it. I take a look at the type of root that I'm dealing with. Remember, square root, there's that invisible 2 there. That invisible 2 becomes my denominator. And then for my numerator, I look to see if I have a power. So there's no power. It doesn't look like there's a power associated with 25, but we all know that there's that invisible 1. So 25 to the first, that invisible 1 just comes up top to become my numerator. Same idea on this next one. I copy that 16 over. The fourth root, that 4 becomes my denominator. There's no power, it's that invisible 1, so I get 1 on top. My cube becomes my denominator. Power of 1 becomes the numerator. There's a bunch of stuff going on in this first one, or in this last one. So first steps first, the 32 got copied. My fifth root, because I have that 5, becomes the numerator. Excuse me, the 5 becomes the denominator. The 4 then becomes the numerator. Which we're like, hey, but that 4 has a negative. Do you remember how we said that if I had x to the negative 4th, that was 1 over x to the 4th because it turned positive? Well, same idea, I'm going backwards. Since that 4 is on the bottom, since this 4 here is on the bottom, it's saying it's negative, so when I bring it up, I have to make it negative. So just like when we talked about exponents, when we have things on the bottom, they are negative. Which brings us to our rules. I know I gave you your slide. Your notes have another slide, but they're basically leading into this. I didn't really find the need to talk about it because I just talked about it, so I'm skipping it and just going straight to the rules. So if I'm giving a number to a exponent that is a fraction, I take that number and I put it under a radical. The denominator becomes that type of radical, and then whatever the numerator is becomes a power. And that's essentially what all of these say. If it's negative, then it's 1 over that radical. Again, negative, it's 1 over that radical with that power. So what we're going to do is we're going to rewrite these all in radical form, which means I need to give it either square root, fourth root, fifth root, whatever it is. So first steps first is I take the number I'm using. So in this first example, I'm going to do 5. So I'm going to have some kind of radical. My 5 is going to be underneath it. My index is going to be the denominator, or 2. My numerator is going to be that power. Well, anything to the first power is itself, so I don't really need to write it. If you would like to write it, you're more than welcome to. It is not going to be wrong, but it's not going to be more right either. Let's take a look at number 2. I start with my radical sign, the 64 underneath. I have that 3 on the denominator, so it's going to be the third root, or the cube root. Again, that 1's the numerator, so it becomes that power. Number 3, I have my radical sign. My 4 goes underneath. The power of 2 is telling me I have the square root. This cubed is going to come hang out with 4. Now, you can write it that way, or, I don't have enough room, you can have the square root of 4 quantity cubed. Either one is fine. They mean the same thing. So again, with 27, oops, I forgot my radical. Radical sign, 27. That 3 becomes my index. That 2 becomes the power. So it's saying 27 squared, or 27 to the 4th power. I'm taking the cube root of that. Number 5. First thing I see is I have that negative sign with that 2. Which I didn't even get a chance to really circle. I'm going to change this really, really small. My negative sign, there we go. That negative sign means that I need to put this as a fraction. So I'm going to have 1 over my radical. Inside my radical is going to be the 7x, because everything's in parentheses. The denominator of 3 is going to be my index. I like having that a little smaller, sorry. That power of 3 is going to be my index, and then that 2 is going to go around my 7 and the x. Or, if I undo that for a second, it's going to go around the whole thing. This last one of number 6, again, I see that negative, so I'm going to have 1 over my radical. Underneath the radical is going to go that 14, because it's what I'm taking the radical of, or the root of. 4 is going to go in for my index. It's just to the 1st power, because I already dealt with that negative part. So I can put that 1, or I can leave it without it. Either way is up to you. Now, if you have your homework, now would be a good time to pause and do the first half of your homework, where it asks you to rewrite everything as a, rewrite it, in that radical form. So I would pause, do the first 12 problems on your homework, and then come back. If you have already, if you're just watching this video for extra help, you can keep going on, but again, I would pause and do that first part of your homework. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to go backwards. So we're going to take it as a radical form and rewrite it with an exponent. So, that's not what I want to do. So first things first is I'm going to take my, whatever I'm taking the radical of. So in this case, I'm taking the square root of 5. It's going to be my big number. That 5 is going to be to some exponent that has a fraction. I'm taking the square root of 5, so that means that I'm dealing with powers of 2. So that 2 is going to be the denominator. There's no power associated with that 5, so it's an invisible 1. So number 7 is 5 to the 1/2 power. Alright, on number 9, we are taking the 4th root of 81. So step number 1 is I write that 81 down. 81 is going to some power. The 4 is going to be my denominator. There's that invisible 1, so it's going to be 81 to the 1/4 power. Number 11, I'm going to have 16 to some power. I notice I'm taking the square roots, so there's an invisible 2. I do not have a exponent or another power, so it's 1. But it is a fraction, so that 1 needs to be negative. So I have 16 to the negative 1/2. On number 8, I have the square root of 6 quantity to the 5th power. So I have 6 to some fraction. I'm taking the square root, so that's a 2. This time I do have an exponent of 5. So I have 6 to the 5/2, or 5/2. Number 10, I have my 13. That is going to be the denominator of 3 with a numerator of 2, because I have that power of 2. And then lastly, number 12, I'm going to have my big base, or my number of 9, to some power. My denominator will be that 4. The numerator will be that power of 3. It is a fraction to begin with, so it's 9 to the negative 3/4. I'm going to end this now. I understand that you may have more notes, but I want to stop, and we'll pick up the rest of this part tomorrow.